This is a video I really want to talk about. This is an older video. I just watched. All right, again, just watch the first 30 seconds or so, and then we're gonna talk about this.
I feel like Street Fighter as a game drives you to be so good at this game. I feel like the top players in Street Fighter 4 are so much better than any other fighting game. It's like, you know, this is the top level at other fighting games, and in Street Fighter 4, you know, this is the top level at this game. You know, this game, you figure someone out, then they figure you out, then you figure them out again, and then
it's a constant conversation.
Yeah, and then you know you have certain times where they just body you constantly.
Yeah.
Then you figure out new tech, and the game is just ridiculously crazy. Like, so that's what I really like about Street Fighter 4. You know, that's why I actually like playing against Sagat sometimes.
That challenge.
The
That
competition forces.
All right. So I remember when this video came out. This video for reference is late 2015, the very end of Street Fighter 4, right? This is the very last thing, one of the very last, you know, one of the very last things that ever got put out about Street Fighter 4. This was right before the final Capcom Cup for Street Fighter. And I thought this video was really interesting because when this came out, I thought that it was hella offensive. But the funny thing about it is that many people either agreed or didn't really care about it. Like, it was like no one found the start of that video even slightly disagreeable. Like, when that video started and he was like, yeah, all Street Fighter players are here and everywhere else is down here. Like, the levels are just so much different. And I was like, what? It was crazy. But at the time, for context, nobody would have said anything about it, right? Nobody would have even cared or even been concerned. It's funny because the comments, there are lots of people who are like, man, Street Fighter 4, a hard game? Pfft, not at all. Street Fighter 4 is an easy game, and Third Strike is so much better. And now it's like everybody's like, man, Street Fighter 4 is just the craziest game of all time. You couldn't hear it? All right, I'll play it again. I'll turn up the volume again, and we'll just watch it together. But it's an interesting video.
I feel like Street Fighter as a game drives you to be so good at this game. I feel like the top players in Street Fighter 4 are so much better than any other fighting game. It's like,
that alone, all right.
you know, this is the top level at other fighting games, and in Street Fighter 4, you know, this is the top level at the top players in Street Fighter 4 are so much better than any other fighting game. It's like,
right. That's the video. That's the part about the video that I care about. This is an interesting video because I think many people don't probably remember when this video came out, or many people were not upset about this when the video came out, right? Like, it didn't, most people were like, yeah, he's right. There are some comments that are basically like, yeah, he never played Third Strike. It's way harder than Street Fighter 4. But it's very interesting because I think the general consensus of most players before the last year or two ago would have been like, yeah, like, what, nobody watched this video? It has like 50,000 views on YouTube. I don't know, maybe people didn't watch the video, right? But what I'm saying is, it's not what he said. It's the fact that this was the common attitude at the time from many Street Fighter 4 players, right? Many Street Fighter 4 players believed in this kind of an attitude. So I think it's very interesting to examine this and just think that this was about 2 years ago. Right? He said this was about 2 years ago that I think that this was not an extremely controversial opinion. You know what I mean? You know, you get what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, I thought it was an interesting video for context. Because if you think about where we are now compared to where people's kind of opinions about games are now, if this video was posted in 2017, I think most people would be like, what are you talking about, Snake Eyes? Guilty Gear players and Tekken players, this and that. But I think at the time there was sort of like the general consensus by most people was that, yeah, like Street Fighter 4 was like, yeah, this game is just the hardest and their players are the best. It's very interesting. I think it's interesting that the general opinion and mood of people has switched so much since this time. Because when this video came out, I think lots of people would have disagreed, but it would have been the minority of people. People would have been like, what? You think that Sonic Fox is as good as Momochi? You think that Rico Suave or any of these KI guys are as good as Momochi? You think that whoever, they didn't even know who was in Tekken. Nobody knew who was in Tekken at the time. The general player, right? Like, no, at the time, like, your random stream monster would have been like, they don't even know any Tekken players. But yeah, you think Guilty Gear players, like, that wouldn't have been probably on most Street Fighter players' mind. But now many Street Fighter 4 players and Street Fighter 5 players, modern Street Fighter 5 players, have seen and watched other games, right? They've been exposed to more competition, different fighting games and stuff like that. So people feel differently, and they would say like, yeah, like, maybe there are similar skill ceilings or like situations in other fighting games that are just as difficult as Street Fighter. Certainly Street Fighter has the biggest player base, right? Certainly it has the biggest competitive player base, so it's likely that the best players are playing it. But it's an interesting video, right? I think it's a very interesting video to think about now, 2 years later. To me, I don't think that it's like, yeah, I don't find the video like him just saying that, I don't know. It's not like it's offensive. I just think that it's interesting to think about in the context of 2 years ago. Many people would have watched this video, especially Street Fighter players, and probably agreed. And now I think the average Street Fighter viewer or player or whatever would watch this video and be like, I'm not sure. Right? They would say like, I'm not sure. Maybe Guilty Gear has a higher skill ceiling, or maybe Tekken, or maybe this game, or whatever, right? It's interesting to just look at the mentalities change, like how the mentality of players who watched and played back then is compared to now, you know? It's just for context. Not to pay attention to anything else but the context of it, right? Just to watch this video.
I feel like Street Fighter as a game drives you to be so good at this game. I feel like the top players in Street Fighter 4 are so much better than any other fighting game. It's like, you know, this is the top level at other fighting games, and in Street Fighter 4, you know, this is the top level.
I mean, he literally says that he feels the top level is that much higher, so much higher than any other fighting game. It's interesting. I think it's an interesting video to think about. Because I think it's interesting because my question is like, do you agree that at the time Street Fighter 4 was like the highest level by far? Or is it now in this modern year, people are just more exposed to other games, so they might not think that way, right? I think that is an interesting idea. Like whether at the time people would have agreed with Snake just because they didn't know much about other scenes, or if it was actually true. Because Street Fighter had been out many, many, many years at that point, right? Street Fighter 4 had been out many, 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 many years at that point. So now it's like, it's really interesting to see now, like, the opinion has changed so much about where Street Fighter is and was and what games have what skill ceiling, etc. Street Fighter 4 was the highest level by far. The only reason it's different now is because of 5. What, you mean the players got worse? Or are you saying that because it's a new game, everybody had to start at a lower level and build back up? Yeah, it's an interesting video. I'd like to hear what Snake... I think if you re-interviewed Snake, I'd really like to hear what he would say. This is 2 years old, this video. Yeah, I mean, it had the biggest competitive fan base. So, you know, it had the biggest competitive scene and biggest competitive fan base. So I think it's hard to argue that it wasn't the highest level of play, right? But, and Street Fighter is still that way, right? Street Fighter still has the biggest group of competitive players and people. But the question is like, is it that much higher? Is like the best player here in this game and in this game, is it close? Is it super big? It's really interesting.